Hey, and welcome to another 10 Commandments for Your Mind segment. Here, I'm going to go ahead and give you an example of the application of the 10 Commandments for your mind. This example is actually personal to me and how I ended up utilizing the 10 Commandments. Okay, so the first commandment goes, Thou have a mind. Right? Remember, our mind is the source of our thoughts. And I would say that for me, around the time that I was finishing college, I became aware of my thoughts and how it actually reflected my reality. So at this point, I'm in my early 20s. Of course, I'm a fully functioning human being. It's the end of my college, and I could hear my thoughts, and a lot of my thoughts were depressed, sad, just very gloomy look towards the future. It was probably because one of my professors began recommending journaling whatever you see. And that's probably when, up until then, I would say I was a science student. And I want to say I avoided a lot of writing classes. So journaling, and it was never about the language or the content or the grammar of that journaling. It was just journal whatever you see. And so around this time, I recognized that a lot of my thoughts had a very gloomy outlook, a very painful outlook towards the reality and towards the future that lay ahead of me. So moving on to the second commandment, thou are the guardian of your mind, right? A guardian, somebody who holds a relationship, who holds a responsibility towards their mind. And I could sense that my mind was down. It was sad. And this bothered me. After that, I realized that it was necessary for me to consider, why is it that I had neglected my guardianship towards my mind? Why is it that my mind, something that I'm responsible towards, why was it in pain? Why was it down? Why were my thoughts stagnant? Why were they pessimistic towards reality? Then moving on to the third commandment, which is thou art the rider of your mind, comes from the idea that our mind is like a wild horse. And it's up to us to tame our horse, to break our horse, to sort of take it from being wild and tame it. So I realized that, so around this time, I would say that I realized that a lot of these thoughts that I was having was because I was influenced or intimidated by the thoughts of the others, right? Whether it was societal pressure, whether it was the idea of being successful, whether it was taming my originality or my creativity, I would say that I could see that I was no longer, or maybe the reason I was feeling such gloomy thoughts was because I could see I was definitely not the writer of my mind. There was somebody else writing my mind. There was somebody else influencing my mind, the direction of my mind. There was somebody else riding my horse. So one of the first steps that I took was, well, if this is my mind, if these are my thoughts, they ought to be influenced by me. So that was the third commandment. So moving on to the fourth, which is thou should build a relationship with your mind. With that, I began to take care. With that, I realized, all right, let's go ahead and make some conscious decisions as to how I can build a relationship with my horse, with my mind. Why don't I go ahead and seek sources, books, media sources that would allow me to have a more optimistic view towards life. Because up until then, like I was saying, I was very gloomy. I could tell I was being influenced by others' ambitions, others' pressure. Once I realized that, and I decided to take ownership of my mind or my horse, one of the first key things was, well, let's go ahead and build a relationship. Let's go ahead and make those thoughts mine. Let's go ahead and make those thoughts have a positive outlook. Let's go ahead and make those thoughts have a different attitude towards life. How about I go ahead and seek those sources that will help me, that will show me how is it that I can have a more original, authentic outlook towards life. Now moving on to the fifth commandment, which is thou should train your mind. And that is how I began to train my mind. I would seek these sources. And the best part was these sources would find their way to me. Now, of course, that meant stopping what others had been suggesting to me, especially around the time at the end of college. Everybody looks to you and says, well, what are you going to do now? Because academia, I'm no longer a student, right? Now I was becoming an adult. Your routine changes, your life changes, your lifestyle changes, you begin to earn money. So that was one of the first things that I did. I began to just cut out the sources that previously influenced me, and I began to seek out new sources that helped me, that I felt would benefit me in my new outlook. So that's how I trained my mind. I would seek out sources that, especially novels, classic novels, that mentored, that had a story where the main person in the story did um, find a way to uh, live out their life the way they wanted. And I always interpreted that maybe the writer was sort of sending a message through that story, even though it was fictional, that it is possible to sort of live our life the way we would like it to be, without having to be uniform or conform to what the general recipe was towards living life. That was, and then um, I would say the more I did that, the more I realized that, why is it that I was depressed? Why is it that I had a gloomy outlook? Maybe at the time because I was unable to communicate what it is that I felt. But as I began to train my mind, as I began to slowly get into the commandments, up to commandment 5, I realized that, hey, maybe these were the reasons why I had a gloomy outlook, because I refused to sort of um, I, I sort of had an avant-garde moment. I refused to sort of give in to the status quo, or what however life should be. Now moving on to the sixth commandment, which is thou and your mind are a powerful force. So yes, I was beginning to feel the powerful force that I was becoming with my mind, because my mind was starting to get ahead of me. It was starting to take leaps. It was starting to move at this new speed with this new training that I was giving it. And the training was how to think more positively, how to have a better outlook towards life, how to maintain my originality, how to move away from being uniform from others. And my mind was beginning to do it on its own. If any situation presented itself at work, um, my outlook towards it would be different. If any news came at me, if any events happened with me or my family members, my outlook towards it had changed, because my mind was now learning. It had learned, it had, because of the training I'd been giving it, because of the relationship I'd been working on developing with it, because of the guardianship that I owed my mind, I could begin to see this transformation, this change. Now, moving on to the seventh commandment, which is thou should nurture your mind. Nurture is allowing the growth and development. And so I allowed once I began to see this transformation within myself, I and my thoughts, I realized, all right, let's keep pushing it. Let's keep promoting this growth and this development. I began to write more now. I no longer was just writing sentences. I was writing paragraphs. I was writing essays. I no longer had a painful or a gloomy outlook towards reality. I had a more optimistic, a more creative, a more the sun is shining type of outlook. And it really was a transformation within my writing that you could see. Now, moving on to the eighth commandment, which is thou should explore your mind. And around this time, I would say I also was traveling. So this has been a couple years since college now. I began to travel with the couple dollars that I would began to make from working temporary jobs. And I would go to museums. And I was so fortunate to see that when somebody would tap into their artistic side or their creative side, it eventually would become their work. And that work would eventually one day be in a museum. And that's what a museum was all about. That was one of the biggest light bulbs that went off. And so I realized that this originality that I felt I had, but I was unable to communicate, was now actually maybe part of my work. Maybe work was more than earning a living. Maybe work is the gift you give back. So that was where my mind took me. And that was how I explored my mind. Of course, it was physically my body and my, it was physically me as a person being at these museums, but my mind would take my thoughts there. I no longer was just gloomy. I no longer was just positive. Now I was beginning to develop a purpose. Moving on to the ninth commandment, thou should care for your mind. Care means giving serious attention. So, serious attention, yes. Now I began to channel in saying, okay, I understand. I see that when you have a positive outlook, then you give it intention now. Instead of just having a wide field, you give it a narrow focus. You begin to focus in on what it is, and you begin to practice on whatever it is that you would like to focus in on. And that is where I began to, you develop a habit. So that is what, how the ninth commandment came into my life. If I wanted to communicate creative ideas, if I wanted to communicate out of the box ideas, I would elaborate it. I would communicate it better. I would present it better. And that's how I began to take care of my mind now. It was no longer just a wide field. It was no longer just all creativity. It was intentional. It was with purpose. Then finally, the 10th commandment, which is thou art wholesome with your mind, thou art strong with your mind, thou art full with your mind. With that, I went ahead and composed. You can say the 10 commandments for your mind. When I had a more purposeful sort of thoughts, my thoughts that began originally as a 20-year-old being, so it wasn't even like a kid, it was a full functioning adult. When I realized that thought was sort of trapped in depression, in gloominess, and I kept working on building this relationship with it, on recognizing that I'm a guardian of it, that recognizing that I should be the one driving the thoughts, and then training it, and then exploring it, and then feeling the power of it, I decided to compose the 10 Commandments for your mind. That is one product, or that is one result out of practicing or applying the 10 Commandments for your mind. It is my gift. It is in a way my purpose. It is me fulfilling my purpose through my writing, through my intelligence, through my experience. And to wrap that up, if you remember me saying that at Preach with Prague, we're all about fulfilling our purpose. And in order to fulfill our purpose, we have to be equipped with certain items, right? One such item would be having a strategy and having a strong mind, because we're going to need a strong mind. Remember, our purpose is finding a root on the ground. And we've got to take care of that root. We've got to nurture that root so that we can watch it grow. And then once we see it, we say, hey, all right, that was what that root was for. We're never able to tell what that root does, what that root was meant for. It's only after we give it time. We give it water, we give it care, we nurture it, we protect it, that we watch it develop and watch it bloom and see, all right, that was what that root was meant for. When I originally began the 10 Commandments example, all I could see was I had a gloomy outlook and I wanted to change it. I doubt when I was beginning or finishing college that I would have known that, hey, you're going to produce the 10 Commandments for your mind, for all your viewers out there, and they will use it as a strategy to develop a strong mind, to build a relationship with their mind. No, I just sort of worked on it, worked on my writing, worked on my creativity, and worked on elaborating. So I hope through this example you can see that what our purpose is just a hint initially, and you got to just keep working on it until, just like taking care of your root, and then you develop it, you build it, and you watch it bloom into this fabulous whatever it is that it's going to be. For me, it's a hashtag 10 Commandments for your mind. If you go ahead and Google this trend, if you go ahead and DuckDuckGo this hashtag 10 Commandments for your mind, you will see it's Prague from Preach with Prague that is the one bringing this trend to everybody. I doubt the depressed me knew that. All I knew was I just wanted to change the outlook of my life. I hope this message brings you inspiration. I hope you enjoyed this example. I hope you understood and you take this example to heart and apply it to your own life. And I wish you all the best with the 10 Commandments for your mind. I hope you apply it to your own mind, apply it to your own life. And I would love to hear from you and your stories as to how it has helped you and how it has come to benefit you. Or if you have any questions, go for it. Thank you.